is Jonathan, and this is TL Toneworks. This video is all about these pickups right here. These are the Nova Pickups Omnia set, and they are passive pickups made exclusively for something like a guitar like this. If you're into rock or heavy metal, this might be the pickup you're looking for. I'm going to give you some details about what makes these unique compared to what you could get mass production type pickups. These versus that, what's the difference? I'm also going to have a few sound samples. What you just heard in the beginning is my Rivera M60. This is an amp from the 1990s. The clean channel sounds more like a Fender, kind of blackface-ish kind of tone, and the gain from this amp sounds more like a Marshall. Here's what I'm going to do. I have a few pedals before me. Obviously my tuner. Need to get this thing in tune. Have a treble booster, a big muff, the Ramshead version, but the nano version, so readily available. For distortion, I decided to go with the Jet Pedals Lion, just because it's more of a, like the DoD preamp 250. It's got that grittier kind of distortion to it, so decided to go with that. There's also the gain from the amp and the clean from the amp. Aside from that, I'm going to toggle between the bridge and the neck pickup. I'm going to play with the tone, with the volume, and at the very end, I'm going to let you know what I think about this particular set of pickups. Up till now, it's very promising, but I'm going to let you know everything by the end of the video. What we are going to start by doing is listening to the clean tone of the amp. That's something that's kind of important with humbuckers, especially if you're more into single coils, which is my case. I really like the sound of single coils, and whenever I get to humbuckers, they sound kind of muffled, or they sound like there's not enough high end to them. So what I want to do is demonstrate what these are capable of. Now take note that this guitar here is from 2008. This means that the pots in here are the 300K. If you had 500K, they would be a bit brighter, but I find that they cut really well through the 300K pots. Here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to take off all the fancy schmancy stuff. I'm going to start with the bridge, both pickups, and then the neck. Now both pickups. Moving on to the neck. The very first thing I notice with these pickups is that it's the clarity that I'm getting, the note definition, especially when you start to use distortion or fuzz. That's usually where some pickups kind of fall apart. You use higher gain and you go to maybe play something as simple as one of these. You're just using 3 strings. And you seem to be losing some of the definition in the notes. Now, even with the clear stuff, and by clear I mean clean tone, I notice that every single note is well balanced. Maybe that has to do with the magnets that are in the bridge position. So what these guys do is that they put neodymium pickups in the bridge position. I didn't even know that's like a magnet you could use in a guitar pickup, but it works really well. My first experience with that is the Jupiter FX Supernova, which is based off of the Super Distortion, but it's got some modifications to it, and it uses neodymium. And luck would happen that it's the same company that designed that pickup for Jupiter FX that makes these pickups, so kind of makes sense. In the neck position, you have the 𝐒𝐓𝐌𝐿 8. Now the 𝐒𝐓𝐌𝐿 8 sounds much fuller compared to the bridge, obviously. It's got a lot of bass, but it's not woofy. Now I did my best to balance out the pickup, so making sure that the high strings and the low strings kind of came out even. But this 4 pole pieces that they have here, not really pole pieces, they're rails. These 4 rails, they really capture every single string. Like there's no dead spots. Whenever you pull on strings, you do bends. There's no dropout, which is very cool. It's not a really novel concept. We've seen that with other companies. But what makes these different is that these poles are in an X pattern, meaning that if you use the 4 cables that come with it, I can't split the coils with this particular guitar, but if you have a guitar that allows that, they are in an X pattern, meaning that you would have, let's say on top here, towards the neck, you would have 1 pole, and towards the bridge, to your right, you would have another pole. So even when you split the coil, you still get that hum canceling. Very cool design. Now, I've taken notes of what makes these different than what you could get, let's say, from other manufacturers. I've taken notes. I can't remember everything. There's a lot of details and even some stuff that I kind of grasp, but it's still a bit over my head. Maybe you guys are going to understand it. So I'm going to grab my notes. I'm going to be right back, and I'm going to tell you the specs and what makes these different. Then we're going to move on to all the other sound samples. Now, I mentioned what makes this unique with the pole pieces and the X pattern, but the other thing too that you have to keep in mind is that everything is built in-house, meaning that they build their own enclosure. They laser cut all the pole pieces, not the pole pieces, the rails. I'm gonna get this right at some point. They laser cut the rails. They build their own PC board for the back plate. They do everything, even the bobbins. So what I have here in detail is that it's laser cut rails. They have FDM 3D printed bobbins, SLA 3D printed enclosure, and the PCB backplate has a quick connect as well. So what's really cool about that is that if you need to swap out, let's say, I don't know, you want to experiment with taking the bridge pickup, putting it towards the neck or whatever, vice versa, it's really easy. You don't have to on-solder anything from the pots. You just take that quick connect from the back of the plate and you can swap the pickups. There's also the fact that you have the neodymium and 𝐒𝐈𝐌𝐿 in this particular set, but if you wanted to, you could contact the company and ask for different magnet types. So if you want, you could have both 𝐒𝐈𝐌𝐿, both neodymium. You could have lesser output, so if you don't want as much output from the pickups, or even more output. There's also a version of these that are made for an active system. And the one thing that I think kind of makes these guys unique is that besides making everything in-house, you can also get custom printed logos, which is what I did when I got in contact with them. They were like, okay, what do you want on these pickups? I'm like, I don't know what you mean. They're like, do you want your logo? Do you want our logo, or both logos together? So what I did is I opted for their logo in the center of the pickup and then my logo at the bottom. So if you get in contact with them and you have a specific design, they're going to ask you to send your stuff over. They're going to send you some different revisions, and you get to choose whichever one works for you. Now, if you also go on their Instagram account, you're going to notice that they do custom work as well for bases, for different types of pickup spacing. So they're really, really customizable when it comes to making these particular pickups. And what's really cool too is that you're encouraging a small company that has been working with some local builders in Germany, and they sent these out to me, no issue. It took a few weeks. It really wasn't all that long. Now, obviously, at the time of making this video, there are some massive tariffs between Europe and the USA. So I'm Canadian, so sending it out here wasn't too bad. I think when it came to import, I paid something like $40 Canadian. Still steep, but it's not as much as if you're in the USA right now. So basically, if you're in the US looking at these, get in contact with a company and see how that works. They are working on another project, which I'm not allowed to talk about. They kind of, slid that into the conversation. Like, hey, we're working on this really cool thing that's upcoming, and I really can't talk about it, which kind of sucks. But at some point, maybe I'm going to make a demo of this future thing that I can't talk about. Now, I've talked about the pickup itself. This set is considered hot vintage or vintage hot. I'm not sure which way around it goes, but basically I'm thinking more like super distortion-ish type of output. I believe this one here, when I did the reading, it was about 14K, and this one here was almost 12. So they're hot. So depending on what you're going into, you might find that you might have to use a pad if you have one, or maybe you like the breakup on a clean channel. Maybe that's a thing for you. I know I do kind of do the same thing with the AC15 and the AC30. I don't mind taking the clean channel, just driving it hard. And yeah, beside the customizable look of it, the output, the magnet types, we're going to listen to these because these are basically the flagship model from the company. Being their flagship model, you want to get a sense of what they think is the optimal version of these pickups. So that's what we're going to do. So now you heard the Fenderish clean from the M60. I'm going to move on to the more Marshall S. So think more hot rodded JCM 800 coming out of this thing, which is a very killer tone. I'm not going to use any boost right now. At some point, I will use the boost, which is the Master Gunner from Northern Effects. Sadly, they are no longer being made, but it's a Dallas Rangemaster style treble booster, great in front of this. Then I'm going to revert back to the clean channel, use the Big Muff and the Jet Lion pedals. The Jet Pedals Lion. I always get that mixed up. And then at the end, I'm going to give you my opinion. So basically, kind of shooting from the hip with this video. I usually have super structured videos. I have to admit, I kind of got bored with doing that. I prefer doing it this way, where I'm kind of talking to you as if you were here and we're just having a conversation. Makes for a more relaxed atmosphere, and I don't have to script as much, which really sucks. So yeah, let's start with the Marshall-esque type of tone. I'm going to boost it, try to get some grittier, not quite metal tone, but on the verge of. If I wanted to do metal stuff, I would have to take out the 5150. And right now it's a bit of a logistical nightmare in the studio. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But you're going to see these pickups a whole lot more on the channel. So if you want to hear more like old school metal kind of stuff, I'll do that for you in a future video. So yeah, enough rambling. I'm going to get to that part. And at the very end, you could use, I'm going to have some timestamps. I'll always use timestamps in these videos. So if you want to use timestamps, just jump to whatever section you want. You just want to get the lowdown. Keep in mind, I'm not getting paid to do this. They just reached out, asked if I wanted to do a demo, check these out. And I said, yes. So in a sense, it is being paid in the form of I get to keep these, but my opinion obviously isn't bought and paid for. I get to say what I want. So I have a lot of positive. I'm going to give you a few things that I think you might want to consider if you're going down that route. And yeah, I just said I'd stop talking and I'm still talking. So who knows? Okay, let's go. So what you're hearing is the distortion from the amp, no pedal. So the settings are basically the gain all the way up to 10. I have the bass at 3, the middle at 3, treble at 5, and the master at 5. The microphone is an SM57. Right here, it's about 3 inches away from the cone, 45-degree angle or thereabouts. It's not a pure science here. I just went and listened to it. As soon as it sounded good, I just left it there. The cab is a Mesa Boogie that used to be a stiletto. Someone took out the amp at some point and just left the English-made V30 in there. So it sounds great, especially paired with this amplifier. That's all I have going on. There's no post-processing rather in Reaper. So yeah, what you're hearing is it's basically the same thing as what I'm hearing here. So it's quite loud. That's why whenever I stop playing, I kind of let the reverb decay. I don't want to talk over the reverbs. But basically, that is the bridge pickup. So now what I'm going to do is play another riff, go from bridge to middle, and then to neck. I will play with the volume to see how it cleans up. Keep in mind, as I think I've said at the very beginning, these are 300K pots, so they're a bit darker, but they still sound great here. So if you have 500K pots, you're going to get all the clarity that these allow for. So let's get back to the bridge. Both pickups together. Moving on to the neck. All right, so now what I'm going to do is use both pickups. I'm going to put the volume at 5, and let's check that out. What I did here is I've taken the tone pots, put them down to 5, and just match the level with the volume here. And what I'm hearing sounds great. Oh, hello. Hello. Yeah, I don't need you to wash my meat. I'm good. I'm good. Go. All right, so moving on to the bridge pickup. I'm going to do the same thing here. So that is still with the volume at 5 and the tone at 5. So I'm going to crank these back up. We're going to move on to boosting it with the treble booster. I'm going to try some lead stuff. I'm not the world's best lead player by any stretch of the imagination. I do have a lot of issues with speed, so I'm not a super fast player. I'm going to be more dad blues, dad rock kind of thing. So bear with me while I struggle. So I'm going to cover the schmutz by adding some delay. So that is still just the amp with these pickups just hitting the front end. Let's add the treble booster. adding a bit of noise here because I'm really boosting the front end of the amp. All in all, right now, this is quite inspiring, and I'm not used to recording with the SM57 as much as I used to. I've been relying a lot on the two notes, but for this video, I thought I'm going to get inspired by the actual amp and guitar interaction. So I'm not going to use the two notes. I'm just going to do it low down dirty with an SM57, kind of haphazardly just placed in front of the amp and hope for the best. From what I can hear, this should come out great. So moving on to the Big Muff. So right now, the Big Muff, as I mentioned, it's just a stock Ram's head version, the nano version. Nothing special. I have the tone at around 1, the sustain right in the middle, and I have the channel, or not the channel, but the volume rather, at around 11. And that's it. Nothing special, no mods or anything. So clean tone again. I like that. I actually like that a lot. I don't know what it is about the neodymium. I have a hard time with that word. Neodymium pickup, but with fuzz, and especially a Big Muff style fuzz. Man, it's quite something. It sounds fantastic. This combination here, these pickups, this guitar, that Big Muff amp, cab, I'd have to reuse that more often because that's actually really fun. Never mind the flub notes. I haven't practiced guitar in like 3 months. So that's what I get. I practiced before I started and I still managed to screw it up. Okay, moving on to the Jet pedal line. It's another thing I haven't practiced enough. So right now what it is if you've never seen this pedal, it's a unique, as far as I can understand, unique circuit where it's based off of essentially the same kind of gain structure as something like a Rat, the OCD, the preamp 250 from the OD. So it's got that thing going on. It has a high pass filter and a low pass filter, gain and volume. Then there's a bunch of little really fancy schmancy kind of thing that it does with having like different input circuits and like JPTR or whatever it is. I don't remember what it is, but basically it's very cool pedal with a lot of flexibility. So yeah, let's start with that. I'm going for more of a light to medium type of tones. I want you to hear it with a pedal and gauge for yourself how it sounds like. So right now the volume is at around 2, so So I just put the tone down to about 5. So what I'm hearing right now is that this is actually a great set of pickups if you use tone and volume on your guitar. If you always leave it on, it's probably not going to matter all that much, but if you play with the controls on the guitar, this particular pickup, especially in the neodymium one, I don't know, there's something really special about that. Okay, so moving on to using both. So I'm gonna try to get the same type of setting on here. So right now I'm going to have 5 and 5 for the volume on both. So last part of the test. So I've never experienced this before, which is kind of unique. When you're using both pickups together and you use the tone, let's say I'm full on over here for the neck pickup. That's neck pickup, that's bridge. Neck pickup, I'm full on over here, but whenever I decrease the tone knob on the bridge pickup, it seems to be a nicer taper and has less of a drastic effect over the high end. So I'm going to do that again, and then I'm going to try to play essentially the same thing, and I'm going to use the one from the neck, and you're going to notice that it's a much more muffled kind of tone. So now the tone is at 1. I'm going to turn it all the way up, and I'm going to do essentially the same thing. Alright, so this is the lowdown, and I'm going to tell you what I think about this particular set, who I think it's for, basically like what kind of player would benefit from this type of pickup, what I think kind of sets the company apart, what I liked about it, maybe some stuff that is less my style, but that could be exactly what you're looking for. So I'm going to give you the lowdown on the Omnia pickup. First off, let's think about the options you're getting. The price point, I think, on these are spot on. They're not too expensive. They're not giving them away. You're getting customizable sets. So, as I mentioned before, if you skip that part, I'm kind of recapping here. So, these come with the neodymium in the bridge and the 𝐒𝐈𝐌𝐿 in the neck. This combination here, according to Till over at Nova Pickup, is basically what he thinks is the ultimate set or combination of magnets for this particular set. So you get all the dynamic range out of the neodymium, and the 𝐒𝐈𝐌𝐿 can keep up with the higher output of this particular magnet here in the bridge. Obviously, they know what they're doing. These pickups are sturdy, they're great, they sound great. I mean, I can get the neodymium is kind of a really strong magnet. I mean, you could pull a small car up with this thing, and obviously there's a lot of pull. So I have to be careful with how I set these so there's not too much pull on the strings. But right now, the way it's set, I think is perfect. It's the clarity that really gets me, especially with really high gain. My current favorite set of pickups is the one that come with my Fender FMT. So that's the one that has the pearly gates and the 59, I think, in the neck. That combination is great, but the output is a little on the weaker side. And when you compare these, it feels like the Seymour Duncan are weak as hell. They don't have a whole lot of like low end. The output feels a bit stifled. This set here, it hits the front of the amp like crazy. So you really have to rethink how you dial in your amp, especially for clean. If you have an amp that doesn't have a whole lot of like headroom to it, if it's a small combo, something like a 15 watt amp or lower, you may find that clean is going to be really dependent on volume setting rather than just plugging in and not using the controls on your guitar. So that's super important to acknowledge, because I played for years without ever touching the controls until I started to play gigs and stuff. And that's where I noticed that whether it was sessions in the studio or live gigs, sometimes going for pedals is not an option. You have to really react quickly. So using controls is great, but if you're the kind of player that never has to do that, if you get a set like this into something like an AC15 or maybe a Fender Deluxe, if you want to keep the headroom and have a cleaner tone, you're going to have to use those controls, because these are on the hot side. This amp here can take it. It's a 60 watt amp. It has ample headroom, but even then I have to be careful. As I mentioned, right now this one here, the channel volume is at 5, which is still decent, and I'm not peaking. I don't have any clipping going on. With pedals, I find that if you get yourself a good pedal that has ample headroom, so there's some pedals sometimes that if you use single coils, they sound great, but then when you go with humbuckers, they kind of fold in on itself. The ones I chose today were because I wanted to really explore the gamut. Like, I don't know about the Big Muff. I don't know if it has a whole lot of headroom or not. That one, I kind of did a blind shootout between a few pedals. I was like, okay, randomly I'm going to pick that one. Turns out that it sounds great with it. The Lion, on the other hand, I think is a little more accustomed to dealing with higher output pickups and low output pickups. So that one could take it really well. Maybe there's some pedals I could try, maybe something like a Blues Driver. Maybe that wouldn't work so well with hotter pickups. I've never tried it. But those ones were kind of chosen just because I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to try them. I hadn't done like an extensive testing of all the pedals I have in the studios. It's not something I did. And I chose this guy just because I felt like bringing it out. I haven't played it since about a year now. So when I lived in Belgium for 4 years, that's where I acquired this amp. And I haven't played it in like a year, and I figured, why not? There's an AC30 over there that I rented this week, actually. I tried it with it, and it sounds killer with these pickups. I did not include it in today's video because, well, I got more videos coming, and these pickups are not going anywhere. They're staying in the guitar. Basically, when it comes to fuzz, there's a lot of definition there. Big Muff is not the cleanest of fuzzes. Sometimes stuff can get kind of woolly. I'm very surprised, especially on the neck pickup. This thing kept up. I could hear all the individual strings, which I haven't heard from humbuckers before. I've heard it with single coils, like a Telecaster through Big Muff. Yeah, you're going to hear the string separation. But with humbuckers, the ones I have in the Gretsch, the ones I have in the 𝐒𝐓𝐀. The ones I had in my Epiphone, none of them did that. They kind of sounded woolly. So I tended to only use the bridge pickup, but with this particular set, sounds fantastic. With the amp distortion, I was kind of surprised. I expected some of those low-end frequencies to kind of get muffled and like hitting a brick wall kind of thing. The whole amp folding in on itself. It does happen with certain humbuckers. As I mentioned before, I have the basic 3, and I kept that setting from using the Seymour Duncan. That was the best placement with the Seymour Duncan. The Seymour Duncan doesn't have as much output, obviously doesn't have as much frequency content. So yeah, this thing is awesome. I didn't have to turn it down to 0. That does happen with certain amps. So yeah, they're bassy. I mean, there's bass there, there's frequency content in both those pickups, but they're not overwhelming. It's not the kind of thing where you're going to find yourself almost not using certain frequency bands. When it comes to the treble booster, obviously these are high output. Then I'm hitting the front of the amp and I'm just getting a ton of sustain. When I was doing that earlier, I was really surprised. I was like, this is a great combination. It didn't matter if I was going with amp distortion or pedal distortion or the fuzz. Everything to me sounded great. Where this set for a player like myself would not be the ideal situation is that I tend to play sometimes with very low wattage amps that don't have a whole lot of headroom. The AC15, I have a 1966 GA15 RVT known as the Gibson Explorer. It's a little, like, I think it's a 12 watt amp from the 60s. That one does take humbuckers, but they have to be low output. These here would hit the front end of that amp and get it into distortion. So if you're looking for squeaky clean, maybe not. The one advantage having something that's higher output is that you may not need your boost pedal. That's another consideration. So when I built this little pedal here, I put a tuner, treble booster, a fuzz, and a distortion. And I was thinking, there's so much output coming out of here, and playing with the volume, I would probably not even need something like a tube screamer or an EQ or a boost, because there's ample volume here. So maybe that's a great thing too. So if you're looking at what people used to do in the 1970s, which was to mod their guitars to have higher output, because pedals were still kind of a niche thing back in the 70s. So people would get higher output pickup, which this kind of alludes to. So going into a Marshall style section of this amp, I'm getting why the super distortion was a big thing back in the 1970s. It was getting that Boston guitar tone, all those bands that came out of the late 70s, early 80s. So disadvantages for me, as I mentioned, I do play a lot of small combo amps. There's some of those amps that just can't handle too high of an output from a specific set of pickups, especially humbuckers. So considering I have some lower output humbuckers, I might use those instead with those particular tube amps. But whenever I'm using something like my Fender FMT with my 5150, I do have to boost it. It sounds good, it sounds really good, but it tends to be so low that I'm more into like almost like Marshall territory with the 5150. So I'm going to have to use either the red channel and boost it with a tube screamer, which is not ideal. And when I tried this pickup set with the 5150, I was like, okay, I'm probably just going to need an EQ pedal or the treble booster just to roll off a bit of the low end from this pickup set. And that is it. Like that sounded awesome. So I'm really curious if at some point there's going to be someone else doing a shootout between the passive set and the active set. I'm really curious to know whether there's a big difference between both sets in terms of tone, in terms of feel. But look, these guys are making an awesome humbucker set. And I don't know if I'm going to get to work with them again. Hopefully I do. If I do, I'm going to see maybe about seeing if they have anything for single coils. I have a really nice Strat over there. I don't know if it's in the shot, but it's an American Professional 2. I can't seem to find a good set of pickups for those. So if The people at Nova Pickups make single coils with this split rails in an X pattern. That, I don't know if that's doable in a single version. Probably not, because you can't really put it in an X pattern. But I'll see. We'll see in the future. But for right now, I'm going to have a link to what these guys do in the description of this video. So it's not affiliate. I don't make any money. There's no kickback there. It's just straight up, if you want to visit them, I'm going to have a direct link to this specific model. Do go on there. If you have any question, Till is awesome, very knowledgeable. I thought I was geeky, but this guy like outranks me severely. I was like, wow, I really don't know what I'm talking about, do I? So yeah, if you have any questions, I know that he's working on answering certain questions. I think he has, what's the word? A blog. Wow, that was hard to get. He's working on a blog. Okay, so recap this idea. Basically, Till has a blog all about pickups, what he's doing, the technology that he's using. If you want to go read that, that's a very cool read. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm working on a whole lot of AC30 content, which is coming up very soon. I'm trying to change the format here. As you can see, I'm kind of shooting from the hip. I almost have 600 videos and I always use a script. And this is the first time where I go with no script. I'm just having fun. And the idea comes from Mr. Pete Honoré. If you know him from Anderton's, I had him on the podcast 2 weeks ago. And yeah, he was kind of saying, well, you know, maybe you should let go of the script, just have fun, shoot from the hips. If you say stupid stuff, you say stupid stuff. If you make mistakes, you make mistakes. So I kind of took off all the safety nets on this episode, and yeah, I'm just rambling. Hopefully I don't lose too many people just bailing out early going, what is this guy on about? So basically, back to having a microphone like I did in the first few hundred videos, right in front of the amp, me talking, and I hope it was fun. Hope you learned something. Do check these guys out and keep an eye open for the AC30 content and some 5150 content coming up too. And I'm going to have some presets for the Kemper, for the Tonex. That's coming up. I'm going to have some free ones I'm going to put in the description. So if you want to go check out what I've built already, you're more than welcome to grab these for free. And I'm going to see you in the next episode with some AC30 content. Cheers.